Can I make my Fractal Audio AM4 amp modeler sound as close as possible to the Diezel VH4? Let's find out. So in this new video series, I'm exploring a bunch of modeling platforms, and I want to see if they can model this very unique and quirky amplifier, my Diezel VH4. In the previous episode, I did the Line 6 Helix Stadium XL, and now we're going to focus on the Fractal Audio sound. Now, I am using the AM4 here, but of course you can get all these sounds with the X-Effects, the FM9, FM3, etc. And of course I'm going to do other episodes with the Fender ToneMaster Pro, the Quad Cortex, Tone X, and maybe some other platforms as well, depending on how well this series performs. Now, I did touch on all the details in my previous episode, but just for the sake of this video and for people who haven't seen the previous episode, let me talk about some details real quick. Now, why did I choose the VH4? Again, it's a very unique and quirky amplifier with some characteristics that are really hard to model, in my opinion. So I'm using channel 3 with my sort of favorite settings. Not super special, but bass, mids set to around 1 o'clock or so, treble around 2 o'clock, 2:30, and gain at 2:30 as well. Deep set to noon and presence set to around 2 o'clock. That's a really great sound, very crunchy, high gain, but with very interesting dynamic. So if I do palm muted notes on the real amplifier, all the frequencies jump out. And there's a very interesting string definition going on there. And when I hit the strings very loudly and open, the sound sort of compresses and ducks down. And that sort of dynamic behavior is very unique. And I don't know if modeling platforms can emulate that just yet, if I'm very honest. Even though I'm demoing some very great modeling platforms, I mean, whatever the outcome is, I like the Helix Stadium XL a lot. I think it's a great product, and the same goes for the Fractal AM4. It's a great product with a lot of great amp models and great effects, etc. Now, in the comparison for the real amplifier, I am going through my real speaker cabinet, so my Grossmann Fatbox 1x12 with the V30 mic'd up with 3 mics. So for the real amp, you're hearing the full analog rig with a mic blend. Now, I did create an IR of that exact mic blend. That's the IR that I'm going to use in my modeling platforms. And by the way, if you want that IR sound or of any other speaker from my collection, check out my web store. So for the modeling platforms, we're going fully digital, and for the real amp, we're going fully analog, just to see how close a modeling platform can come to the full analog rig, which is very interesting in my opinion. All right, so for the Fractal AM4, I'm using the Diezel V4 Silver 3 amp model, which is based on a silver face VH4 on channel 3. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a full mix comparison and discuss the results afterwards. Take a listen. All right, so that was my Edwards LP-CTM Les Paul Custom with Gibson pickups, through the amplifier, through the AM4 with no pedals up front or anything like that. And there definitely were some differences. And trust me, I took my time to try to dial this thing in to sound as close as possible to the real thing. At a certain point, I was just like, you know what? It's not going to get any closer. So it's done. I don't think the AM4 sounds bad, but the response and the overall frequency response is just different. Again, the real amp has that quirkiness where the palm muted notes jump out and the open notes duck down and compress. And the modeling platforms so far, including the AM4, don't really replicate that behavior fully. That's why it's really hard to level match the two. In some palm muted sections, the AM4 sounded a bit more muffled and less loud. It's because the amp really jumps out with palm mutes and the pick attack as well. Again, that's what makes this amp so unique in my opinion. Anyway, now let's take a listen to a isolated guitars comparison of the same thing. Oh, and by the way, I should note that for the isolated comparison, I am turning off the high pass filter, which is set to 76 Hertz. For the full mix comparison, it doesn't make sense to leave all that low end in there. For the isolated comparison, you're gonna hear all the low end in all its glory. Okay, take a listen. All right, so same differences. The amp model sounds a little bit more dry. It's really hard to get the saturation just the same because it changes with the amplifier depending on how hard you play and how you play. And with the amp model, all of that is a little bit more static, that behavior, if that makes sense, and the dynamics, the overall dynamics as well. You can hear that the real amp has some really nice string definition and clarity going on without there being any fizz. But whatever I did with the amp model, you know, add treble, add presence, it didn't really change any of that. It just made the amp model more bright and a little bit more sizzly, if you know what I mean. I still think that the AM4 sounds pretty darn nice, but it doesn't sound the same as my amplifier. Could be because of a variety of reasons. You know, maybe they modeled a different iteration of the VH4. There's bound to be an impedance curve difference as well. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. You know, there might be reasons, but this is what I have. You know, this is my VH4, and I'm not sure what they modeled in here. But yeah, still there's a difference. In the past, you know, with various modeling platforms, I was able to get really close. But for some reason, the VH4 is making that really hard on every amp modeling platform so far. All right, now let's take a look at the preset that I've created to match the amp as close as I could. This is how it sounds with this guitar, my Balaguer Espada. So let's take a look at the settings that I'm using here. I'm not going to use the editor, as you can see. I'm using the actual hardware, so bear with me if I make any mistakes. But if we go back to the preset, we just have the amp model here, and I have the input gate on as well. All right, now let's go into the amp block. These are the settings. Now, as I mentioned, I did mess around with these quite a bit to try to match the sound to the real amp. In the end, I came pretty close to the actual settings, as you can see here. So bass and mids raised up a bit, treble raised up as well, a little bit more than on the actual amp. Presence is quite the same as the actual amp. Gain is also very similar, if not exactly the same as the real amp, as well as depth. So that's cool. I did try to deviate from that to get that string definition the same, but that, didn't really help. Okay, let's see what we have going on. So in the IR block, I am using my own IR, same one that I used in the previous video, which is based on the exact same setup that I'm using right now. Same blend, same level, same mics, etc. And then let's go to the advanced amp settings. So you can see some other tweaks that I did. I tried a bunch of stuff that didn't really work. I don't think I did anything here. No, let's go to the next page. I tried adjusting the negative feedback, but that didn't really help, to be honest. I think I didn't change anything here. I'm not a huge fan of going into the super deep parameters. Oh yeah, here I did some tweaking for the input EQ. I added some definition, as you can see, 3.67, to add more string definition and clarity. And when I did that, I had to compensate a little bit by raising the gain. And that did help to give the amp a little bit more string definition. And this is one of my favorite parameters on the Fractal audio units for tone shaping, to be honest. It's a really powerful page we have here. Let's see what else I did. So for the speaker impedance curve, I chose the 1x12 V30, as I'm using a 1x12 with the V30 as well. I did try some others to see if that would make a drastic difference, but it didn't make a really drastic difference. Not in the way that you might expect, to be honest. So this works really well. Then there's one more thing that I changed. Let me go back to the power amp setting. Let me look for that. I did change the power tube type to EL34, as you can see, as this amp has EL34s in the power section, so that's worth noting. Yeah, and that is the preset. That's all I did in the end to shape the tone to my liking. And again, it sounds pretty great. I mean, let's take another listen. There's something about the Diezel sound that kind of sounds a little bit broken, but not in a bad way. That's one of the quirks, right? The pick attack is kind of interesting and sort of saggy. And we do get some of that in the amp model for sure. But as I mentioned with the real amplifier, when I do palm mute versus open notes, there's a bigger difference in dynamics for some reason. Anyway, it's my job to be critical and to listen to all the little details and nuances. But in the end, I think that the Fractal AM4 sounds pretty great. It doesn't sound exactly like my amplifier, That happens, especially with this amplifier. I'm very interested to see how other modeling platforms will perform in this series. But yeah, the AM4 definitely didn't perform in a bad way. I still think it sounds great, even though it doesn't sound exactly like my real amplifier. And that's the most important thing, right? It's important that you feel inspired and that you're having fun and that you can get the sounds that you want out of a unit like this. But yeah, I mean, the Diezel VH4 is just a really awesome amplifier, and it's really hard to beat in terms of the unique quality that it has. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to know. Also be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as that really helps the channel out. I'd really appreciate it. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to support this channel, you can get something in my affiliate links like a Diezel VH4 for Thomann and Sweetwater. I'd really appreciate it. or get something in my web store like an IR pack or a capture pack or something like that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.